Hey everyone, so now that it has been confirmed that Zoro has Conquerors Haki, and it seems like his Ashura ability is actually some sort of manifestation of Conquerors Haki or related to Conquerors Haki, it looks like there is a clear path to the next step of growth for Zoro, and I have an idea of how it's going to play out possibly over the rest of Wano. But before we get into the in-depth explanation, make sure to subscribe for more One Piece content like this every week, and I will be dropping a Zoro character analysis video at 100k subscribers, and we are very close right now. So, what we just learned was that Zoro himself is not aware that he has this ability, or that Ashura is in any way tied to his innate Conquerors Haki. This is of course not the first time that Zoro has shown Haki techniques without him realizing that they are Haki techniques. We actually may have seen Zoro using all three forms of Haki pre-time skip without us realizing it. We saw that first with the Mr. One fight, as we got the implication from Hyogoro's explanation that what Zoro did against Mr. One was some level of armament Haki, as well as very possibly the ability to sense the presence of his sword potentially being tied to observation Haki. And then of course with his fight against Kaku, Zoro was able to utilize Conquerors Haki in combat for the first time if we assume that's what Ashura is. But there has always been something strange about Ashura in that we all understood that it was a power-up for Zoro at the time, but it didn't really play out like a normal power-up from then on. For instance, Luffy got Gear 2nd and 3rd in Enies Lobby, and Sanji got Diable Jambe, and both of those power-ups became a regular part of their arsenal for the rest of the pre-time skip. However, Zoro in the first place only ever showed one move with Ashura, and from then on, despite facing difficult opponents such as Ryuma, Oars, and Kuma, he never showcased Ashura again. It wasn't till his final fight of the pre-time skip against the Pacifista that he finally showed us that he could still access this ability, even if only for another one-off move. And obviously since then, we've gone 400 chapters through the New World without Ashura ever coming up. So, all of that is to say that from the start, Ashura was the most mysterious and inexplicable of the power-ups the Monster Trio got in Enies Lobby. It was the one that was most rarely seen since then, and I think now finally we can understand why. The problem with Ashura, as I see it, is that it seems to be related to Conquerors Haki, which is a technique that Zoro doesn't even know he has, meaning at this point in time he can't freely use Conquerors like other Conquerors users to just knock out a bunch of people. So because Zoro can't actually consciously use Conquerors Haki yet, it's very likely that he can't possibly pull out Ashura easily on command. Remember, what we've seen of Conquerors users in general is that before a Conquerors user has mastered the ability and is able to freely use it, before getting to that stage, instead the Conquerors users are only able to access it situationally. The ability tends to come out only in dire situations with your back against the wall, and your spirit somewhat explodes. That's what we've seen with Ace, with Luffy, with Doflamingo. Before Conquerors has been mastered, these guys were really just releasing Conquerors Haki in the heat of the moment, when the situation pushed them to it. To me, that fits perfectly with the reason for why Ashura comes up so rarely for Zoro. He didn't bring it out easily pre-time skip like Luffy or Sanji could bring out Gears or Diable Jambe, because it's possible Zoro just couldn't bring it out on command. Maybe it's something that only comes from extreme situations where he was able to manifest his Conquerors Haki. That's why maybe we saw it when he was struggling against Kaku. Kaku was Zoro's strongest one-on-one opponent in the series till that point. He was starting to take heavy damage and Zoro seemed to be losing. That's when Zoro was driven to unleashing, I guess you could say, the full strength of his spirit against Kaku. Similarly, against the Pacifista, that was Zoro essentially barely even able to move around, but at that stage of being pushed to his limit, he was able to access Conquerors Haki and use Ashura again. Now obviously Zoro knows he's using Ashura in those situations. It's obviously a conscious effort he's making. He is naming these attacks after all, it's all clearly deliberate. I'm just saying that because Zoro knows when he goes into the zone where he can use Ashura, doesn't mean that he was able to use it on a whim pre-time skip. I think that's definitely supported by the fact that Zoro did not use Ashura for pretty much the entire battle with Kaido and Big Mom. There were plenty of times before this moment against Kaido where it would have made sense for Zoro to go all out and use his ultimate technique, Ashura, just like everyone else was using their best moves and their best forms. But notice that Zoro didn't actually use Ashura till after he suffered severe injuries and was basically in a state where he was at his limit. I think it's very possible that in that moment, and only in that moment, is he able to access his strongest ability again, because those moments where he is pushed to his limit are when his spirit becomes the strongest. Again, that is just how Conquerors Haki has worked for pretty much all past users when they were at a stage before they were aware of it and could consciously easily control it. This would also explain why Zoro didn't use Ashura against, say, the birdcage for example, because it's simply very possible Zoro can't just use it on command. So all that being said, I think this opens up a great route for Zoro to hit the next level. If it is the case that Zoro cannot regularly, easily bring out Ashura because it is a product of Conquerors Haki, which he did not yet have conscious mastery over, if this is the case, it makes his potential very clear, and it makes the stepping stone for him to reach that potential very clear. We can see that Ashura is strong enough that it can actually even scar an opponent like Kaido, supposedly the strongest creature on Earth. The problem is simply that Ashura is not, and has never been, a consistently usable power-up like Gears or Diablo Jambe. It has always only been used for one-off finishing moves. As such, what if Zoro could fight like this for an extended period of time, like Luffy can with, say, Gear 4th? A single attack in Ashura was arguably the most damage that Kaido has received this entire battle. So how strong could Zoro be if he could consistently fight in this form? Because as I see it, if Zoro could fight in this form regularly, not just for one-off finishing moves, then that would probably make him a tough opponent for pretty much any character in the world. If Zoro could fight in Ashura for an extended period of time, then it's entirely possible that his goal of defeating Mihawk isn't actually, that far off. As such, the next step for Zoro does seem to be actually mastering Conquerors Haki, and I like to believe that this is actually something that can happen by the end of Wano. So let's assume this is the final battle for the purposes of this video. So yes, Zoro is very injured at the moment, he seems to be out of commission, but I do wonder if it's possible for, say, Marco to accelerate that healing process and get him back into the fight. Because despite all the good showings Zoro got against Kaido, if this is the final battle of Wano, then I think a lot of us still hope he gets a good 1v1 fight as well. I do think it would be very, very strange and irregular for all of the other Straw Hats to be getting one-on-ones, while Zoro, who has gotten a 1v1 fight in every single major New World arc he's been in, just lies around injured. Assuming Zoro is put back into fighting shape somehow, then the two routes I would see towards him getting some mastery of Conquerors Haki would be, first, through a good old-fashioned duel. Let's say his opponent is hypothetically King. In that case, just as Zoro's fight with Kaku all the way back then pushed Zoro to awaken Ashura and essentially Conquerors Haki for the first time, maybe a duel with King can get the same result, only this time Zoro may be pushed to use it longer, such that by the end of the fight, he actually is able to use it on command. On the other hand, right now, there's a war going on throughout the island, and Luffy is currently occupied, Momo's not around. The Scabbards have some specific goal that they are focused on, meaning you could argue there is no central leadership figure in the midst of the battle on Onigashima at the moment. Again, I would call back to Zoro kind of taking a detached role in terms of responsibility during the first half of Wano, and basically saying he doesn't want a leadership role. Yet, Conquerors Haki is the sign of someone who has that disposition of a king. And as I've talked about in depth in the past, I do feel that a major part of Zoro's growth in Wano could be him more actively coming into his own as a leader and taking that responsibility. There are, after all, many parallels between Zoro and Oden that I'm not going to rehash here. You can see a lot of it in my video on Zoro getting Conquerors Haki if you like. And part of the similarity that I will mention is that they both have the qualities of a king or a leader, but choose not to take that role, something that Oden realized was a mistake by the end of his story. I really hope that this comes into play in a strong way for Zoro in the modern day, and that I think would be so much more powerful if Zoro mastering Conquerors Haki would be tied to him actually growing as a character rather than just having a tough fight. I think it would be an amazing development if we did actually get to see Zoro step up as a leader while Luffy is fighting Kaido on the roof. Kind of similar to what we got in Enies Lobby while Luffy was fighting Lucci, just in a bit of a more definitive, pronounced way in Wano. And I would hope that this would lead to his first conscious use of Conquerors Haki. Maybe we get to see him using it in the more traditional way of knocking out, hordes of enemies for the first time, before then getting to see him use Ashura on command for an extended period of time during a one-on-one with an opponent like King, for example. To me, that would be best of both worlds. Getting to see Conquerors coming out first, through a moment of character growth or leadership, and then getting to see that reflected in his improved combat ability with maybe greater control over Ashura in his main 1v1 battle in Wano. So if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe, and you can support me on Patreon to get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics.